Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you so much for attending our webinar this morning. My name's Alyson Pellowe. I'm the one on the right, and Julia Wallis is one of my lovely trainers on the left. Just a quick little bit about People Vision. So People Vision have been in operation for 15 years. We are an HR and training provider. We love doing these little sort of espresso sessions so that we can engage people on different topics. They've been very successful. We've done Managing Your Manager, and we did an employment law one. Julia's going to do the conflict today. So yeah, it's just great if we can have lots of interactivity. I hope Julia doesn't mind me saying that it's her first webinar. Are you all right with that, Julia?
Yeah, please be gentle with me.
The more you put into the webinar, the more you'll get out of it. So and just use this questions box as much as you can, and we will try and make it interactive by unmuting you and making you part of the workshop as much as we can, trying to keep as much flow as we can. But anyway, over to Julia.
Hi there, Julia Wallis. I'm a trainer and do design as well, but I've got a special interest in conflict. And a couple of years ago, I got trained up as a workplace mediator, and realised very quickly that if we can avoid going to tribunals and mediations, if we could just handle conflict a little bit more effectively at work. So that's me, and yes, it is my first webinar, so quite happy with the content, but pressing the buttons a little bit worried about. Still, I'm sure Alyson will hold my hand virtually as we go. So what I'd like to ask first is how many of you have experienced conflict at work? And will you put a poll up there, Alyson?
I put the answers could only be yes or no. I didn't think there was a maybe button, and I should think I know which way this is going. So guys, if you could click on the buttons that you can see on the screen so that we can see what people are saying. Okay. There you go, Julia.
Right, I can't see that.
So
I need to press?
Hang on a minute. I've shown. Can you all see how many? I've shown hide poll results. No, I've shown them, so they should come up. Maybe you can't see it, but it's 100% of people have experienced it. Have experienced conflict.
Okay, so can I ask another question now? I mean, that's not surprising. Could I ask how many of you, when you've reflected back on the conflict, kind of wish you'd handled it differently to get maybe a more effective result? So you've thought about it and you thought, oh yeah, I could have handled it more effectively.
So here I did put some maybes. Because I thought that people might have thought, well, you know what, actually I didn't do a bad job there. So here people can say either yes, maybe, or no. So we're just waiting for one or two more people to vote. And those are the results. So can you see those results, Julia?
No.
You can't. Martin said he can see it. I'm assuming other people can see it, but I'll just talk you through. 50% of people said yes, they could do it differently. 33% maybe, and 17% said no, they would do it the same. Okay, so back to you, Julia.
Okay, so I think sometimes, when I'm in the training room and we're talking about conflict, people see it as quite a negative thing, but I'm sure we'd all appreciate that, conflict is healthy. If we have a little bit of conflict, we often get better solutions to things. Things aren't always easy, they're complex in work today, so conflict will arise. And what today's session I'd really like to look at is that we can choose different styles, we choose our behaviour, So rather than kind of reacting to conflict and maybe reacting in the way that we always do react, maybe there's an idea here that we can look at what we're trying to achieve and maybe choose a conflict style and how we go into that. So Alyson, oh right, great, I can move the slides now. Okay, I've popped up a slide there, and a bit of a negative one really. You can see in the centre difficult behaviour and how we might see some of those behaviours in work. We might see people that were once quite motivated, seem to be lacking a bit of motivation, uncooperative behaviour, people complaining, being rude, maybe a little bit of backstabbing and gossiping going on. That passive aggressiveness, so, you know, not kind of screaming and shouting, but a bit of sarcasm and you know, manipulation going on. Or we could see it very overt in forms of bullying and controlling. So there's some of the symptoms that we might see and things that we really want to avoid. Also, I think we don't all of a sudden get conflict. It could be festering, you know, inside for a bit. And there's a conflict escalation model here, and it may be that you recognise these things, but you might not recognise them in this particular order. They might be in a different order, but we will experience maybe some discomfort in a relationship. There might be an incident, there could be misunderstandings, and you sense some tension in teams or with certain individuals, and that crisis point can hit very quickly, or it can take some time. What I have found in, I think, every mediation that I've done, a big contributor to conflict, or conflict being handled badly really, has been email. So love it or hate it, what seems to happen is that if there isn't an email at the heart of a conflict getting it started, where you have a breakdown in relationship, people will start to avoid each other face to face, and they'll start to communicate through email, and that's where really you get lots of misunderstanding, because people read things in a certain way, the message sent isn't the one received, and you know, people start to you know, keep all those emails. And the mediations that I've done, I would say most of them, people have brought along copies of past emails from the other party that they printed off, and you know, you can see that it's really fueled the tension. And once you get people away from their keyboards and face to face, people start to move forward. So I'm not saying delete all your email, but if you can get to grips with conflict without kind of resorting to the keyboard, it can be really beneficial.
I wonder whether people could just go to their questions box, please, and give us some maybe some examples. I have to say this is confidential, so I might say your names, but I won't be saying where you work or anything like that. So don't worry, the other people on the call won't know. But maybe you can give us some examples, or if you agree, yes or no, with what Julia says about the email. Is it a blocker rather than an enabler? So we'll just wait for a few minutes while you go to the question box and tell us any information you've got about that.
And just while you're doing that, yeah, I had someone said to me a couple of months ago, I've been arranging some training, and I was working with this other trainer, and they said, oh, you're very different to how I thought you'd be. So I said, oh, what do you mean? And they said, oh, well, you know, you're really friendly and a good laugh. so I said, oh, and I sort of asked a few questions, and basically they'd got some really short, and how they'd taken it as quite abrupt emails from me. And sort of reflecting back off that, I can think, well, yeah, I tend to send a quick email in a break when I'm training or getting on the train and that kind of thing. So the message sent was just being direct and giving information, but the message being received was that, oh, she's a bit abrupt,
Yeah.
which I'm certainly not.
No, I agree. I mean, I think I'm also those people on the call who know me, and I know you work with me. I'm also guilty of that. Um, very, very short emails. And people are saying, yes, absolutely, email can be the stem of it, but also it is actually face to face as well, working with quite aggressive people. So back to you, Julia.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is move on to the next slide, and I'd really like to talk about, well, before we kind of really talk about different approaches, look at some different situations. And it's kind of saying, you know, we can choose our style and behaviour according to the situation. And yeah, we've all got our personal preferences, and the people that we might find ourselves in conflict with, they might have their, well, they will have their preferences and style. But this is around, you know, the first one. If the issue is absolutely critical to the organisation or the unit's success, we might take a different approach as to if the second one, if you know, if sustaining supportive relationships is really important, and perhaps we're building those relationships, maybe we'll take a different stance when we approach conflict, and we'll look at some of those approaches in a second, just really looking at the reasons at the moment. Is there a rush? You know, have we got to resolve this conflict as quickly as possible? You know, if I don't know, if the fire alarm goes and someone, you know, has got a different idea about where the exit is in the building, and they know the building, I'm not going to go into conflict, I'm just going to follow them and get out alive, you know. I mean, it's quite an extreme example, but, you know, is it really important that we've got to solve it quickly? Is the situation based on miscommunication or lack of communication? Is there a little bit of history going on here about last time you went into conflict, and well, you're not going to let them have you over again, you know? So maybe we choose a different one there. And is the situation just clearly based on personal differences? You know, we might have a different approach, many ways to skin a cat. You know, maybe we could say, well, you know, let's just hand over on this particular occasion. Let's go with somebody else's preference. So, you know, let's look at the situation before we kind of choose what style we go into. So rather than reacting, we choose a response. So how does your personal conflict style impact on others? Well, let's have a look at some conflict styles here now. And I just want to go straight to the boxes, really, of controller. I'm sure we can all think of people, I don't know, inside work, outside of work, that are just personality-wise, they're highly controlling. They just like to be in control, and you know, they want to be in charge. Another style would be avoidance. So, and this can be, you know, a real dangerous one. Sometimes it is right to avoid conflict, and we'll look at those situations. But this is the person that just naturally shies away from it. You know, none of us really think, oh, great, a bit of conflict. But these are for people that would just, you know, rather avoid it completely than confront it. Then if we go up to the right-hand box, the collaborative style. So this is the person who just naturally will, they'll want to quite often get face to face and work through it together. So quite often team players will take this kind of style of a collaborative approach, and obviously there's benefits of that. Then the person that kind of always says, no, go on, you the accommodator, you know best, you do it your way, and I'll trust you, you take control kind of thing. And then there's that box in the middle, and I'm sure those of us that have been married a long time will recognise this one, that word of compromise. Yeah, so we need to get to agreement, so I'll give a bit, you give a bit, which is fine. Sometimes we need to compromise, but sometimes we're in danger there of a bit of one of those committee decisions that no one really gets what they want, and we're all a bit dissatisfied with the outcome.
Julia, what I'd like to do is I'd like people to, you can raise your hand. I'm not sure if you know how to do it, everybody who's on the call. I'm really looking to speak to get somebody on the call who's got something to add to that. Maybe I'm going to ask Martin and Pauline. I'm going to unmute both of you. Going to Martin first of all. Martin, can you hear me? Can you speak?
Yes, I can hear you.
Brilliant. And I'm going to unmute Pauline. Hello, Pauline. Oh,
good morning.
Oh, hello. Great. So, Martin, perhaps you can tell us about a time that you've experienced one of those quadrants, or the one in the middle. Where have you experienced that in the world? Let's leave it in the world of work for now, if that's all right.
Yeah, I just wanted a question really. The avoider and the accommodator, they both seem to be lose-win. And I just wanted to understand what the difference between the two were. Was the avoider and the accommodator look exactly the same, really?
Julia?
Yeah, okay. Well, the accommodator is, I lose, you win. The avoider, it could be a lose-lose. So we're both going to lose. Or it could be, because I've left the scene of it, I don't know what's going to happen, and it could be that I'm going to avoid it, so the other person just by default will win. But probably in order to give you a bit of clarity, Martin, if I go through when would be a good idea to take these approaches, it might give you a little bit more clarity.
Okay.
So I'll certainly do that. But yeah, good point.
Pauline, have you observed any of these particular styles in your workplace?
Yeah, I would say I've experienced them all at some stage or another. I think it depends on the other party. I tend to try and avoid the situations if I can,
right.
And often I end up being the loser in the situation, and that possibly could lead to more conflict later on down the line. But no, I think I've experienced all of them at some stage.
So in that moment when the conflict, no matter how big or small, is happening, why do you think it's your natural way to potentially avoid it? What's going on for you at that moment?
In the avoider situation, you mean?
Yeah.
It's probably I feel powerless to make a point, or I kind of already accept that there's no point in dealing with the situation. So like if it's upper management and I just know that they're not going to listen to me, so I just would avoid bringing my situation to their table, so I automatically lose.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you looked I'm sure that if you're working with controllers, you know, who are in the grey box above, I'm sure that's kind of a natural way. But I think it's really good you're learning. I'm going to hand back over to you, Julia, in a minute. I think that it's really good you're learning that is a sort of a short-term fix, isn't it? And that actually, you know what, in 3 months, might be 6 months' time, if I haven't brought that up, it's only going to get worse. And that escalation process that Julia talked about is just going to present itself. Back to you, Julia.
Hi, yeah, thanks for that, Pauline. I think quite often that is a reason that we just think, well, I've got no control, they're not going to listen to me, and it's a natural response to avoid. And I think, you know, just like to talk a little bit about control here. I think we sometimes think of it in quite black and white terms of, right, this is what I can control in my role, and everything else I can't control. And I think we miss that middle circle of influence. So I think there's stuff that is outside of our control, but actually, and I'm thinking kind of looking upwards at the moment, but if we do kind of make our point, no, we can't control it, but we might have some influence. And, you know, we might be heard, you know, our point might be taken up maybe by somebody else, but we've made our point. And, you know, there is that it's just that split between control and out of control. You know, the stuff that there is stuff that we can maybe influence by the approach that we take. It's quite a good box to start with, the avoidance one, and when I was getting to grips with this model by Kilman, it was the one that I thought, well, you know, you know, we do avoid, but we shouldn't avoid. But there are times, I think, that maybe it is right to avoid a bit of conflict, and a situation I can think of is maybe where perhaps you're managing, you've got a new team going, and they're in the sort of forming and storming stage. I think there might be times then, as a team member or a manager, to avoid it, because it will kind of sort itself out. There's no point maybe in getting involved, because it makes more of the situation than it should be. So it might be the point here is avoid for now. If it carries on and there's an impact on performance, then yeah, we need to kind of step in. But a boss of mine years ago, he said to me, Julia, you don't have to win every battle to win the war. And I've carried that one with me.
Yeah.
You know, just sometimes, and maybe we're going into accommodating here a bit, is look, on this occasion, the relationship is far more important. I know how I do it, but if you want to do it that way, that's fine. And you know what? They might actually have a better way. But I think it applies to avoidance as well. You know, maybe take a step back and let them sort it out for themselves. Any thoughts there?
Not for me particularly, but it would be great if we've got some questions and comments from different people. I think Alyson, I'm not sure. I've sent you a pin. I'm not sure whether you're actually able to speak. But Alyson, if you could go onto the questions box, that would be great, and give us any insight. I mean, I think being a compromiser, I think you're right, Julia. Different times in our career is a bit of a journey, isn't it? So you're absolutely right. You have to pick your battles. So sometimes you're going to avoid or accommodate. But if we can, we should all, of course, be aiming for collaborate all the time. I just think it would be unreasonable to say let's all be 100% collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, let's. Oh, look, before I go on, does that? I'm just wanted to check back in with Martin, because he had the question around avoid or accommodator.
Yeah, I'm going to ask him.
Is Martin still with us and okay?
Yeah.
Great, good stuff. Yeah, so moving up to collaborator, of course, you know, this is the one, isn't it? A win-win. When people collaborate, when teams collaborate and work really effectively, we always get better results. I often ask the one in the training room, is it, you know, is anybody perfect? And someone will say George Clooney or somebody, but you know, a person isn't perfect, but can a team be perfect? Well, it nearly can be. So if we take a more collaborative approach, this would probably be the best way to handle conflict, because we get a win-win. And if you don't get your way, at least you feel that you were listened to and you contributed. But the thing about collaboration is it takes time and it needs the willingness of all parties concerned. And going back to the workplace mediation work that I do, the parties, before they get into mediation, just by going into the process, they have agreed to collaborate. So whilst the relationship could have completely broken down, things can get really difficult, they have agreed that they will collaborate in the conflict, and I believe that that's part of the reason that it's so successful, workplace mediation. They've generally got the same goal, which is to get back to having an effective working relationship, but they've bought into the process, and the process of mediation is collaboration. So that's why it's successful. But if you think about you know, times when conflict, and you might think of it as when it's been really healthy conflict, and that's where you've got the best outcome for the organisation or the team, and it's generally by the collaborative approach. So it needs willing parties, and it does need a bit of time. Anything there, Alyson?
No, that's it. That's great. Carry on. That's brilliant.
Okay, I'm going to move over now to the controller box. So this is where quite often time is going to be of the essence, and the outcome is really, really important. And it may be a case here that you're a manager, and ideally, when you're handling team conflict, you like a collaborative approach, so you might get the problem, call a team meeting, and hopefully you have that collaborative working style. But this is when maybe something's landed on you and it's got to be done as quickly as possible. So you're saying, right, as the manager, look, I'm going to be directive. This is what I want to happen. You do this, I'll do that, you do this, you know, and you assign different tasks and activities to different people in the team, and it's got to be done by this date. And I think that if you take this controlling approach, if it isn't the way that you always behave, people will respond quite positively to it.
Yeah.
Because they know you well, they know that you can actually say, hey, over to you, take an accommodating stance. They know that you like to work collaboratively, and if you're going into a controller behaviour, people will, because they know you can do other styles, and you know those people that just operate on one setting on the oven.
Yeah.
they know that you're not like that. So actually, when you ask people and you show this style, they will respond really positively to it.
Yeah.
So for this one, I think that, and yeah, we all know people that naturally just want to be in control. But if you do choose this as a style when it's really important, and you'll do the wash up and the debrief afterwards, I think people will really respond very positively to this.
Great. I just want to see if Angela, can you hear us? Can you speak? I think you might have muted yourself. So if Angela, would you like to add anything to that? I think if you can unmute yourself or go to the questions box and add anything. No, that's not working. Okay, carry on, Julia.
Okay, so I'm just going to go now to that centre box of the compromiser, and if we think about negotiation skills, this is kind of the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So we really aren't going to. We've tried to perhaps collaborate, and I think when we're compromising, we're still in that collaborative approach, but the compromising tends to be an end result of, well, okay, so in order to get there, if I can have this and you can have that. So, you work together and it does end up as a bit of a compromise.
I definitely do that. That's definitely something that I do. And that's definitely about my desire for for outcomes and tasks. Because I'm, if you look at personality types, I'm a red. So action is really important to me. So sometimes any action is better than no action. And sometimes that means that I end up compromising on really, a little bit like the avoiding, it will bite me in the bum. Maybe it wouldn't take 3 to 6 months, but I would be frustrated afterwards, having given in quite quickly, just to get a decision.
Yeah.
Buying a house is a great example. Buying a house, you're talking big numbers, £5,000, £10,000. I might just to close the deal, I might compromise and say, yeah, that's it, great, accept the offer. Really, 3 days too early, and I could have got another £10,000 as an example.
Oh, I remember that one with you, Alyson. Yeah, and I think that's key to remember. We all naturally, our preferences, our personalities, we do fit into one of those boxes probably, and we recognise that. I would say that when I go under real pressure, I probably go to accommodator.
Right.
So I'll let someone win, and then that'll put me under pressure, and I'll kick myself.
Yeah.
Because really, like you, if you'd have just worked on it a bit longer and taken your time, we could have gone to collaborative.
It would be nice to see. So now you've described all the boxes. If people could go to the question box and just key in which style. So we're looking for all of you, if you wouldn't mind, just go to the questions box and tell us from those 5 options which style. I think you're right, Julia, to say about under pressure, because when we're given the time, we probably would all aim to be a collaborator. But in your natural style, under pressure, where would you probably most likely to go? So if you could just go to the questions box, all of you, and key that in, that would be really useful. So Julie, you say you're probably an accommodator. I'm a compromiser. Okay.
And I'm sure we all know a few controllers. Pauline's talked about avoider. Yeah, we kind of will just naturally go to that place of reacting.
Yeah.
But would it be more effective to choose where we're going to go?
Yeah.
And if we can get into the habit of choosing where we're going to go, then that under pressure hopefully will be the natural behaviour to actually, rather than just go to where we normally go under pressure, if we practice choosing where we go, then the natural thing becomes that we actually say, right, hang on a minute, let me think about this, and I'm going to choose where to go. And how that can work practically is when you find yourself going into conflict, perhaps in a one-to-one or a meeting, it's just to give yourself a bit of time and say, look, I'm going to halt it here because I just want to go away and get a bit more information. Just think about how you can build in a little bit of time for yourself in order to get yourself into a more kind of rational space.
And I think
where you can react.
Yeah, and I think that absolutely going sort of 360 back to your email example. I think people behave very differently when they are on email to face, and we wouldn't speak to people in the way so curtly or so directly or so necessarily quickly to respond. We might have a very different style. So I think what happens is this whole world of technology and being on our mobile phones and this drive and desire for answers very quickly means that we are responding sometimes as well. Listen, on your handheld device, if you're on your phone, you respond in a different way to. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes in email, and I don't do it often enough, but I do maybe write an email and I put it in my drafts. I press save and I think about trying to consider my response more. But actually, Julie's right. I mean, probably I should pick up the phone, but but in the event that I do an email, so. Yeah, so we've got some of the answers are in. We've got a couple of more of a percentage of avoiders, and somebody says I'm an avoider accommodator combo. I hate the idea of conflict. Someone says I try to assess the situation, decide, but generally I compromise. So I think you're right. We're in a period, Julia, where all these little workshops are just about trying to make us more conscious of our incompetence. So we're not saying we're always going to be a collaborator and aren't we perfect. It's more about when you next face a little conflict or irritation in the workplace, just thinking about how we can deal with that. I'm just wondering, Julia, have you got the actual conflict styles questionnaire?
Yeah, somewhere I would have
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure someone
Yeah.
else got it. So after the event, if people are comfortable to give us a lovely testimonial and some kind words or some constructive feedback too on the event, we'd be happy to share that with you. I'm sure I've got a copy of it, the Kilman questionnaire. So after the event, just as a quick aside, we will give you a link to this event on my website, so you can hear it all over again or whiz through and hear the bits that you want to hear. But yeah, that might be useful for you all to go away and do the actual assessment yourself. Okay, back to you, Julia.
Yeah, you know, I think that the thing that we're saying here is that it's about that choice, and in order to give yourself time to choose your approach, you need to build in a bit of space. On the point about emails, whilst I still will send a quick email from my phone, if I've got something difficult to approach and say, we've got potential conflict, I'll think then about a carefully worded email, or as you say, picking up the phone or having a meeting to try and sort it out. And a habit I've got into now is with difficult email is writing it up, like you say, put it in your drafts box, and then go back to it later or the next day. And I don't think I've ever gone back to it and sent it without changing it. So I've definitely changed it, and yeah, I'd say 100% of the time change the words.
I think if you're a manager as well, and you had to, I know we're sort of I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, and I know you're conscious to get to the next slide, but if you're a manager as well, it might be useful to print out those emails and talk through them with your subordinate, for want of a better word, people who work for you, and say, if they're particularly a bit too aggressive in their emails, because they may not have had anyone tell them that before. So showing it, getting the old highlighter pen out and saying, I just want you to be clear about how this is coming across. Obviously that's difficult if that's your boss or someone you work beside, but if it's someone you manage, then you do have responsibility to have that conversation with them. Okay, Julie, do you want to go into the next piece?
Yeah, and just on that, it's really important, isn't it, giving and receiving feedback effectively?
Yeah.
And I think that's the subject of a future webinar.
I've no doubt we will wheel that one out at some stage. I've no doubt.
Yeah. So, just thinking about that now, I'd like to do a poll of thinking of a recent situation. Could choosing a different style of managing conflict, so perhaps one of the styles we've looked at, could it have achieved a better result?
It's not actually a poll, so we're going to ask you.
Oh, is it?
No, if you could go into the questions box, all of you, and just give us an example of, as Julia says, an example of where you could have done better, had a better result. So we'll just wait for you to do that. Don't worry, you don't have to use names. Okay, we have someone who said, if I had with my very early relationship with my line manager, if I had explained to them, I'm sort of elaborating this a bit, if I'd explained to them how their behaviour had made me feel, it would have been a better relationship.
Yeah.
And someone said, my first management job, I was too accommodating and it caused problems. Yeah, interesting. There's quite a lot. I wonder if other people find the relationship with their line managers more challenging, obviously, than they do with their subordinates. So just wait for another 1 or 2 answers to come in. And I have got this other poll, which I'm just going to sort of launch as well, actually, which says, Julia, this one says, what level of employee causes the most conflict in your workplace? So is it the board, senior managers, middle managers, employees, or no one? So it'd be interesting to see what people say about that. We'll just wait for everyone to vote. Guys, if you could all vote, that would be great. Just waiting for another person, somebody. Okay, so the answer is 20% the board, 20% senior managers, 40% is the middle managers. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Okay, so what is it about the middle managers that are, so those of you who said that, maybe if you could just type in and say, it's the middle managers that are causing the most conflict in your workplace. You know, what makes you say that? Or in a workplace, it might not be your workplace. Okay. Okay. So we've got, they tend to block changes. Yeah, I think so. And they can be too process and not enough people focus. All right. Thanks very much. Okay, back to you, Julia, in the next slide.
Okay, so this is just really some questions that you might want to ask yourself in order to choosing that way that you're going to handle conflict. What conflict styles do you notice within your team? So, you know, what's the sort of culture of it? What do team members tend to prioritise when conflict arises? Do they all go into control mode or into accommodating? Is it about the goal or the relationship? Do things like, you know, position get in the way of resolving, grade and things, you know, does it get in the way of resolving conflict?
Yeah.
And what are the causes to maybe let conflict escalate or blow up? And that may be down to a bit of avoidance.
Just building on what you said there, Julia, someone said there can be a power trip and people hide behind upper management. I think that was relevant to the middle management comment. So you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Okay. What I'd like to do, just, time's getting on, and just to sort of finish off with the last session really, is talking about when we go into conflict. Oh, I'm just trying to press the slide, Alyson.
Not going?
Oh, yes, it is. Here we are. Don't worry, I haven't become a brain surgeon. I just want to talk a little bit about our emotional response and our rational, because the rational bit is about choosing. The front of our brain, we have this thing called the amygdala, which can hijack us. And without going into loads of detail, it's that thing that kicks in when we're faced with fear. And for people, a lot of people, conflict can be, oh gosh, a source of fear. And our reaction, and it's a physical response, so it's not a way we choose to respond, but our reaction can be to fight back, or flight, so go into avoidance, just leave the scene, or go into freeze, as in just our whole brain freezes up, physically we freeze up, and we just don't know what to do. And so that's a very emotional response that we might experience, or we might see other people experience at work. And when that takes over, there isn't much we can do from a rational point except just to let that happen, and it will happen very, very quickly. But in order to really handle conflict effectively, it's about getting ourselves off that emotional line and into a more rational space. And I've just popped up a technique that we can do to get ourselves over to a rational space, and a space where we can choose from. So pause, just take that time and acknowledge, and this could be something we're saying, or it could be something that we're doing inside, and acknowledging our feelings. So hang on a minute, I feel tense, I feel really angry, or feel really upset, and it's just taking time to acknowledge how we feel, and just to clarify to ourselves or to the other person the situation, and then to give a response as opposed to a reaction. So, and here we're getting into the field of assertiveness, really, about, taking our time and choosing how we respond as opposed to how we react.
Great.
Alyson, anything to say?
No, next slide.
Okay, so next one, another kind of technique for us, and another training acronym you might recognise. So really, when we get into an emotional space, quite often the first thing we do is stop listening, or we hear what we want to hear. So here it's about really listening to the other party and the person we may be in conflict with, empathising with them. So really, trying to see things, trying to put their shoes on, try to see where they're coming from, and ask questions. And if somebody is in controlling mode and they just want to control and tell you what to do in conflict, if you can just calmly ask questions, just by you being calm, that can calm them down, and just paraphrasing and summarising it back to them can just get us out of quite an explosive conversation into a more, not explosive, but an emotional conversation interchange into a more rational space. And again, by doing these things, they take a bit of time, but just get you both away from the emotional space into the rational space. And so, assertiveness, a whole field in itself. Keep calm, not always easy when we feel ourselves into conflict. We get into conflict because we care about the relationships, and we care about the outcomes, and we want to do a good job. But keeping calm and staying in a nice, rational, assertive position.
Brilliant. Well, as Julia says, assertiveness is probably a whole session on its own, and I've no doubt that we will weave that in, and feedback is another session that I'm sure we will do over the time of our webinars this year. So all really that remains is for us to say thank you. Maybe you could just click down, don't worry about the next 2 slides maybe, Julia, just go to the closing slides. Is to say thank you so much to everybody who's got some questions. So we're very happy to take questions through. I can unmute if anyone's got some questions. If you can raise your hand, if you know how to do that, or just put me in the questions box that I'd like to ask a question, or indeed write the question on the questions thing. But I'm sure you'll all agree that was a great little chit chat there with Julia. I hope you've enjoyed that. I don't see any questions coming through at the moment. So what we'll do after, if you keep clicking, Julia, what we'll do is we will send you the copy of the slide. Well, actually not a copy of the slides. We send you a copy of the actual recording, which goes up onto our website so that you can share with your friends. I'm sure you can listen to with a glass of wine at your leisure. No, don't worry, we know you won't do that. So yeah, we understand everyone's got to get on to their next parts of their day. So thank you so much. Any other feedback would be gratefully received. Back to you, Julia.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, my first webinar, and I hope that it's given you some things that maybe to think about for use at work, and some of this stuff can work quite effectively outside of work too. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, guys. We look forward to getting some testimonials or just some comments from you. That helps us greatly. All right, have a great day. Bye.